Hey folks, welcome to the tutorial. This one is evolutionary tree thinking, the basics, and the goal of this video is to introduce you to some terminology, concepts, and misconceptions before we dive in. So here we see a huge tree of life. This one is very complex. It includes animals, fungi, plants, etc. We won't be studying anything quite that complex, but hopefully after watching this video you'll have a basic understanding. So here are a couple of examples. The one on the left is Darwin's original tree. He was trying to make some connections about different animals that he saw, and this was the best representation of how they were related that he could come up with. And the second one, the one on the right, these are the modern trees that we use. They're also called phylogenetic or phylogenetic trees. And you can see that there are different shapes. We've got some angular, square, kind of rounded, but they all convey the same information. So we've got some terminology here, and the first one that we have is taxon, or the plural form is taxa. This is a group of one or more populations of organisms, or of an organism or organisms. These are located at the tips. So in this case, on the upper, on the top graph here, we have human. Human would be a taxon. Mouse would be a taxon. Fly is a taxon. And then we have nodes. These are where where a branch will break apart and split into two. This is where two taxa share a common ancestor. And then we have a clade, and these are a group of taxa that can be separated from the rest of the tree by cutting a single branch. So you can see that human and mouse represent a clade, and if we were to cut that right below that node, they would stay together. That means that they are more closely related to, say, the fly. And then we have the picture on the bottom. This kind of gives you a better sense of what we're talking about here when we're talking about trees. So if you start with your grandparent and then you go to parent, and then it splits and you have child and sister. Well, say you're the child. Your sister, you're more closely related to your sister than the cousin, because you share a common ancestor, which would be your parent. However, you and your sister and your cousin are distantly related by your grandparent. All right, so let's look at some terminology. Natural selection. This is survival and reproduction of individuals due to their inherited characteristics. This is a driving force of evolution. And then we have genetic drift. This is a reduction of traits or characteristics in a population due to random chance. For example, the graphic that I have here, we have a single population that has blue flies and green flies. For some reason, all of the green flies get destroyed in a forest fire. So then it takes those genetics out of the population. And then going forward, you have just blue flies. And then the next term we have is fitness, the ability of an organism to survive and reproduce. And remember that this doesn't mean strongest, fastest, tallest. It means that you can survive long enough to reproduce and pass along your genetics into the gene pool. And then we have extant and extinct. An extant organism is still in existence. Humans are extant. Apes are extant. Fruit flies are extant. And then we have extinct. A group of organisms no longer have any surviving members. So those would be some of the dinosaurs, stuff like that. All right, so it's question time. Darwin Awards, genetic drift, or natural selection. If you are not familiar with Darwin Awards, here we have a graphic. Basically, these are people who have taken their genetics out of the gene pool due to their, I don't know, stupidity, lack of intelligence. I'm not really sure. So is that genetic drift or is it natural selection? And also be sure to explain your choice. All right, misconceptions. Number 1, evolution results in progress. Organisms are always getting better through evolution. We have to be really careful about the descriptors that we use when describing evolution. Simple and complex. We go from simple to complex. That's okay. As far as getting better, there are costs. Whenever you evolve, there's another cost. Let's see. Number 2, species are distinct and natural entities with a clear definition that can be easily recognized by anyone. It's just not that simple. For example, we have a situation in North America where coyotes are mating with eastern gray wolves. Right now, this is a speciation event. It's not clear. The lines species are blurred, so it's not always that clear. And keep in mind that right now, evolution is pretty slow when we're looking at large organisms. So it's not as easy to draw those lines. Number 3. The fittest organisms in a population are those that are the strongest, healthiest, fastest, or largest. And we talked about that on the last slide. It doesn't mean that. Fit means that you can survive and reproduce. Number 4, natural selection involves organisms trying to adapt. No. Once you are an organism, that living, breathing, you can't evolve anymore. You are what you are. You can't. You can pass along your genetics, and those may mutate, switch some things around, and but as far as you are you. And number 5, extant organisms evolve from other extant organisms. And that's like saying humans evolved from apes. No, humans did not evolve from apes. Humans and apes share a common ancestor. So just what you have to kind of watch when you are describing the relationships between two organisms. All right, question time again. Here we have Lamarck. He came before Darwin. He was trying to explain evolution. So here we start with the original short neck ancestor of the giraffe. And then he keeps stretching his neck to reach higher leaves and stretching until the neck becomes progressively longer. So what's wrong with this explanation of why giraffes' necks are long? All right, moving on to some concepts. So we have convergent evolution and we have divergent evolution. So convergent evolution is the process whereby organisms not closely related independently evolve similar traits as a result of having to adapt to similar environments or ecological niches. For example, flight in bats and insects. They're not closely related, but they do fly. So it's analogous. Their wings are analogous. But they don't evolve from this similar structure, from the same structures. So then we have divergent evolution, and that's the process by which a species evolves two or more descendant or different forms. So, okay, we have here in the example the structures of the forelimbs in bats, humans, whales, and cats. So if you look at the graphic, the bones that are the same color are analogous to, or they're homologous to each other. So like the humerus the radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals, phalanges, you can see how those structures are different in the different organisms. So that is an example of divergent. So you go from a common ancestor, and then over time characteristics kind of separate them out. And convergent evolution is when it would be like flight in two very not very related species. All right, question time again. On the Galapagos Islands, Darwin observed that each island had different species of finch that had differently shaped beaks. Are these finches example of convergent or divergent evolution? All right, we're going to close up with a quote from one of my favorite biology guys, Charles Darwin. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the most responsive to change. And I think that's very important to remember, that you don't have to be the smartest or the strongest. You just have to adapt to your environment. So the questions, write down your answers, bring them to me, and we'll talk about your answers tomorrow. Thanks, guys.